Last time we stopped at this paragraph talking about political administration. Today we are going to continue with the opening scene of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. The opening scene of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the narrative of the Buddha's last days, text chapter 4.6.4, gives us a glimpse into this tumultuous phase of Indian history when Magadha, the rising star among the northern monarchies, was expanding in influence and absorbing its neighboring tribal republics. In the passage reproduced here, we see King Ajatasattu, the ruler of Magadha, setting his sights on the Vajjan Confederacy, the largest and best organized of the tribal republics. When the sutta opens, he sends his chief minister to inquire from the Buddha whether he has any chance of success in waging war against the Vajjans. So interesting. A king asks Buddha for an advice or a prediction whether he'll be successful in the war. Interestingly, let's see what the Buddha answers. The Buddha questions Ananda about 7 conditions of social stability that he had earlier thought the Vajjans, concluding that as long as they keep to these 7 principles, as long as these principles remain in force, the Vajjans may be expected to prosper and not decline. He then convenes a meeting of the monks and teaches them 7 analogous principles of stability applicable to the monastic order. This is where the Buddha taught these 7 principles and how to maintain a community, so to speak. It can be either the Vajjans, the monastic order, or any community we are in. These 7 principles are applicable. What are these 7 principles? We will find out when we read the sutta. Next paragraph is the Chaikwan. Would you like to read?
Since the eventual triumph of the monarchical type of government seemed inevitable, the Buddha sought to establish a model of kingship that could curb the arbitrary exercise of power and subordinate the king to a higher authority. He did so by setting up the ideal of the wheel-turning monarch, the righteous king who rules in compliance with the Dhamma, the impersonal law of righteousness. See text 4, 1.1. The Dhamma that he obeys is the ethical basis for his rule. Symbolized by the sacred wheel treasure, the Dhamma enables him to subdue without force all the nations of the world and establish a universal reign of peace and virtue based on observation of the 5 precepts. See text chapter 4, 6.5. Thank you.
Thanks, Sister Chaikwan. So this is how the Buddha tried to establish the observance of 5 precepts within the kingdom. Why? Because the monarch here, the type of government of kingdom, monarchy, is inevitable. So the next best thing to do is to establish a model of kingship that will subordinate the king to a higher authority. What higher authority? In this case, the Dhamma itself. Next one is the second. Would you like to read?
The wheel-turning monarch rules for the welfare and happiness of his subjects and extends protection to all within his realm, even to the birds and beasts. Among his duties is to prevent crime from erupting in his kingdom. And to keep the kingdom safe from crime, he must give wealth to those in need. For in the view of the Nikayas, poverty is the breeding ground of criminality. This theme, mentioned among the duties of the wheel-turning monarch in text 4, chapter 6.5, is elaborated in text 4, chapter 6.6. We here see a wise chaplain advise a king that the correct way to end the plague of theft and brigandage is in his realm is not by imposing harsher punishments and stricter law enforcement, but by giving the citizens the means to earn their living. Once the people enjoy a satisfactory standard of living, they will lose all interest in harming others, and the country will enjoy peace and tranquility. Thank you.
Thanks, Sister Second. Okay, so this is talking about how to make your citizens prosper. I feel this is pretty relatable, even in today's context. Let's take a look. Let's say this line. To keep the kingdom safe from crime, he must give wealth to those in need. For in the field of Nikayas, poverty is the breeding ground of criminality. Yeah. This is pretty true, isn't it? And this is elaborated further. We here see a wise chaplain advise a king that the correct way to plan to end the plague of theft and brigandage in his realm is not by imposing harsher punishments and stricter law enforcement, like this, but by giving the citizens the means to earn their living. Once the people enjoy a satisfactory standard of living, they will lose all interest in harming others, and the country will enjoy peace and tranquility. So I feel like in the context of Singapore, I think Singapore does well, to a very large extent. Singapore earning livelihood in Singapore, you can earn quite a decent amount. And as a result, I think the crime rate is lower compared to other countries. So for me, I feel like Singapore does well in these regards, to a large extent. Where I came from, Indonesia, it's not so easy to earn a living. And you will see the crime rate, people don't feel safe walking on the street. This is something pretty unique to Singapore, and probably a few other countries, where you feel safe walking on the street. Why? Because the crime rates are not as high compared to other countries. Are there zero crimes? No, there are still a few crimes here and there if you see the news, but overall, it's pretty safe compared to other countries. Why? What makes the difference? I feel like it's exactly what is mentioned here, highlighted in yellow, giving the citizens the means to earn the living. When you can earn comfortably, the incentive to commit crimes is lower, because if you get caught by doing crimes, like the reward of committing the crime successfully, not getting caught, is lower than just doing your job normally. So this is, I think, why this works for Singapore and why this principle applies. Okay, with that, we have concluded, we have finished the introduction. Any questions or comments? so far? If not, maybe we can read one sutta today. Since it's Vesak, it's just appropriate to read one sutta. Okay, Sister Aiki, would you like to read?
For the happiness visible in this present life, upholding the Dhamma in society, the king of the Dhamma, the blessed one said, monks, even a wheel-turning monarch is just a just and righteous king does not govern his realm without a co-regent. When he had spoken, a certain monk addressed the blessed one thus, but who, venerable sir, is a co-regent of the wheel-turning monarch, the just and righteous king? It is the Dhamma, the law of righteousness. O monk, replied the blessed one.
Okay, thanks, Sister Aiki. Okay, what is co-regent? So is it something like companion? Let me search. Okay, Google here says co-regent is joint ruler. So it's something like the king's companion. So the question here is, the Buddha said, a wheel-turning monarch, here it means like a king, a just and righteous king, should govern the realms with a companion, a co-regent. Who is this co-regent? The Buddha says, the Dhamma. The Buddha tells the monk. Footnotes number 1. As the standard for the wheel-turning monarch, Dhamma is not the Buddha's teaching, but the moral law of justice and righteousness, on the basis of which the righteous king rules his country and gains sovereignty over the world. In Indian iconography, the wheel, chakra, is the symbol of sovereignty in both the temporal and spiritual spheres. The word ruler assumes kingship when the mystical wheel treasure, Chakaratana, appears to him. See text chapter 4.6.5. The wheel treasure persists as the symbol of his rule. Analogously, the Buddha sets in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, which cannot be turned back by anyone in the world. Okay, that's for the footnotes. Next paragraph, Sister Billy, would you like to read?
It is the Dhamma, the law of righteousness, O monk, replied the Blessed One. In this case, the wheel-turning monarch, the just and righteous king, relying on the Dhamma, honoring the Dhamma, esteeming and respecting it with the Dhamma as a standard, banner, and sovereign, provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for his own dependents. He provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for the Khattiyas attending on him, for his army, for the Brahmins and householders, for the inhabitants of town and countryside, for ascetics and Brahmins, for the beasts and birds. A wheel-turning monarch, a just and righteous king, who thus provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for all, is the one who rules by Dhamma only, and that rule cannot be overthrown by any hostile human being.
Thanks, Sister Billy. The Buddha here expands further, relying on the Dhamma, honoring the Dhamma, esteeming and respecting it, with the Dhamma as his standard, banner and sovereign, provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for his own dependents. Expanding further, he provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for who? For the Khattiyas, for the army, for the Brahmins and householders, for the inhabitants of town and the countryside, for ascetics and Brahmins, even for the beasts and the birds. give a quick summary. A king, a wheel-turning monarch, provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for all. How? When he rules by the Dhamma. And this rule cannot be overthrown by any hostile human being. Okay, next one, Sister Singhui, would you like to read?
Even so, O monk, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, the just and righteous king of the Dhamma, relying on the Dhamma, honoring the Dhamma, esteeming and respecting it, with the Dhamma as its standard, banner, and sovereign, protects lawful protection, shelter, and safety in regard to action by body, speech, and mind. It teaches thus, such bodily action should be undertaken and such should not be undertaken. Such verbal action should be undertaken and such should not be undertaken. Such mental actions should be undertaken and such should not be undertaken.
Thanks, Sister Singhui. So in this case, the Buddha used the Dhamma as an analogy. Yeah, so here the difference is safety in regard to action by body, speech, and mind. Yeah, I like this. Yeah. Previously, let's see. Yeah. Safety for the Khatiyas attending on him for his army, and so on. And here, the Buddha teaches safety in regard to action by body, speech, and mind. Such bodily action, such verbal action, such mental action should be undertaken or not undertaken. Okay, the closing paragraph. The Tathagata, the Arahant, the fully enlightened one, the just and righteous king of the Dhamma, who thus provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety in regard to action by body, speech, and mind, is the one who turns the incomparable will of the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma only. And that will of the Dhamma cannot be turned back by any ascetic or Brahmin, by any Deva or Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. Footnotes number 2, compare with the shout of the Devas at the conclusion of text chapter 2.5. With that, we have finished reading this sutta called The King of the Dhamma. Any questions or comments?
So the wheel turning monarch, the equivalent that is compared here, right, is the Dhamma for the wheel turning monarch is like the law of the country. Is that the right interpretation?
Okay, let's take a look. So Sister Billy's question is whether the wheel turning monarch described in this sutta is about the law of the country. Is that your question? Okay.
I'm not sure whether there's subtle difference because here the words used is still Dhamma, right? It's still the wheel turning monarch, the just and righteous king relying on the Dhamma. So, but then by the context, it reads to, as I read on, I feel that it's like the law, how the king, or in the modern context, how the country is run by the law to protect the people. I'm not exactly sure.
So, okay, at least the line highlighted in blue, it talks about the Dhamma, but whether this Dhamma refers to the laws and in that country,
The line above the blue color sentence says, is the Dhamma, the law of righteousness. So it is something about the law, right? Yeah, I would think so. The law that governs the country, but it is based on righteousness.
I would think this would be like a principle on how to govern the country. Yeah, the Dhamma is like one of the principle. For example, to give the citizens what they need is one of the principle of the Dhamma itself. Yeah. So it's like what principles should the king base on how to rule the country. So in this case, I think the Dhamma, the principles of the Dhamma applies to how the king should govern the country. So not exactly the laws itself, but how to treat the citizens to make sure the kingdom prosper. That is what I would say. So for example, the one highlighted in orange here, it provides lawful protection, shelter, and safety for all the citizens. And with the Dhamma as the principle, they can create policy on how to create this kind of safety, how to reduce crime. So I would say this still refers to the actual Dhamma itself. As the guiding principles, and they can use that to create policies, to create the laws. That's a good question. Thanks, Sister Billy. Any other questions or comments?
愿消三障出烦恼，愿得智慧真明了。我愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。
Thanks, Sister Singhui. Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a happy Vesak Day. Happy Vesak Day, everyone. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Happy Vesak Day. Bye-bye.